In just hours, this storm shut down an entire nation. January 26th began without sunrise. The sky stayed locked in a dull gray, heavy and unmoving, as if the sun itself had decided not to show up. Snow fell sideways, driven by winds that screamed through empty streets and rattled frozen windows. Across the United States, millions woke up to a country that no longer functioned the way it had the night before. From deserts that rarely saw snow to cities built for winter, but never this much, the storm arrived without mercy. In places where snow was a novelty, cars sat abandoned at odd angles, doors frozen shut, alarms howling uselessly beneath thick white blankets. In the Northeast, where residents were used to winter's cruelty, even seasoned snowplows struggled to keep up. Every road became a question mark. Every journey turned into a gamble. Phones buzzed nonstop. Schools closed. Offices shut down. Flights vanished from departure boards. Families stared out windows at streets that no longer looked familiar, transformed into endless white corridors with no clear beginning or end. In a small town in Ohio, a man named Daniel shoveled his driveway for the third time that morning, his breath coming out in sharp, painful bursts. Each scoop felt heavier than the last. Snow kept falling faster than he could clear it. His lower back screamed, but he kept going. Somewhere inside the house, the heater hummed weakly, fighting a losing battle against the cold pressing in from all sides. Across the country, emergency services were already stretched thin. Dispatchers took call after call, cars sliding off highways, elderly residents trapped without power, families running out of heat. The storm did not discriminate. It swallowed cities and farmland alike. Airports became frozen islands. Pilots peered through windshields smeared with ice, visibility reduced to almost nothing. Runways disappeared beneath layers of snow and freezing rain. Ground crews worked with numb fingers, spraying aircraft with deicing fluid that instantly crystallized again. Every decision felt urgent. Every delay carried risk. Meanwhile, the power grid began to fail. Ice-coated lines sagged under impossible weight. One by one, transformers exploded in flashes of blue light, plunging neighborhoods into darkness. Over 500,000 homes lost electricity. In the silence after the power went out, people realized how loud warmth really was and how terrifying its absence could be. Social media flooded with videos, whiteouts swallowing highways, snowdrifts taller than cars, wind howling like something alive. People joked at first. Then the tone changed. This was not just another snow day. This was a storm rewriting the rules. Subscribe now. Bye. Because the next story starts right after this governor's declared states of emergency. Shelters opened in schools and community centers, their lights glowing like beacons in the endless gray. National Guard vehicles rolled through snow-choked streets, their engines roaring against the wind. And still the storm intensified. By nightfall, temperatures dropped even further. Snow piled higher. Ice thickened. The country held its breath, realizing that this was only the beginning. America had not frozen yet, but it was close. The second day of the storm arrived with no relief. Snowfall rates increased, and the wind grew sharper, more aggressive. Entire neighborhoods vanished behind white walls. The line between sky and ground disappeared, leaving people disoriented and afraid. On a rural highway in North Carolina, traffic ground to a halt. Cars sat bumper to bumper, engines idling until fuel ran low. Some drivers abandoned their vehicles and tried to walk to safety, only to realize how quickly the cold drained strength from their bodies. What looked like a short distance became an impossible journey. Inside homes without power, families layered clothing and huddled together in single rooms. Candles flickered, batteries died, phones became precious tools, checked sparingly to conserve charge. Outside, the storm never stopped moving. Emergency responders worked until exhaustion blurred judgment. Snowplow drivers took turns sleeping in their vehicles. Paramedics navigated icy streets by memory alone, sometimes abandoning ambulances to reach victims on foot. In one city, firefighters battled a house fire caused by a space heater malfunction. Flames fought against snow and ice, steam rising into the freezing air as water instantly turned to slick sheets. The fire was eventually contained, but the damage was done. Winter did not forgive mistakes. Hospitals filled with patients suffering from hypothermia, frostbite, and carbon monoxide poisoning from improvised heating attempts. Doctors and nurses stayed past their shifts, knowing replacements might never make it in. Far above the chaos, meteorologists stared at maps glowing red and purple. The storm system sprawled across the continent, massive and stubborn. There was nowhere for it to go, and no reason for it to weaken. In cities, the silence was eerie. No traffic. No distant hum of normal life. Just wind, snow, and the occasional crack of ice breaking under pressure. For many, the isolation was worse than the cold. The storm turned neighbors into lifelines. People knocked on doors to check on strangers. Shared generators powered multiple homes. Hot meals were cooked on gas grills in garages with doors wide open, breath fogging the air as food was passed hand to hand. In the middle of it all, fear quietly grew. Not panic, but the slow realization that systems people trusted every day could fail. That comfort was fragile, that nature did not negotiate. By the end of day 2, the storm had claimed lives. The numbers were still uncertain, still climbing. Each loss carried its own story, its own chain of small decisions that ended in tragedy. And the snow kept falling. Night fell early on the 3rd day, and darkness felt heavier than ever. Without power, cities became shadowy outlines beneath the storm. The cold reached levels that made exposed skin burn within minutes. Inside a shelter in a high school gym, hundreds lay wrapped in donated blankets. Children cried softly. Elderly residents stared at ceilings, counting hours. Volunteers moved quietly, handing out soup and reassurance they weren't sure they believed themselves. Outside, rescue teams responded to final calls before conditions became too dangerous to continue. Radios crackled with static and urgency. Every decision carried weight. Go farther and risk the team, or turn back and leave someone waiting. Somewhere beneath the storm, a private aircraft attempted to depart, battling wind and ice. Moments later, emergency frequencies filled with alarm. Flames briefly illuminated the snow before being swallowed by white. Investigators would later piece together what happened. For now, there was only loss. Across the nation, the storm reached its peak. Snowdrifts swallowed cars whole. Ice snapped trees like twigs. Roads were no longer roads, just frozen rivers of uncertainty. The phrase "once in a generation" echoed across broadcasts, but it offered little comfort to those living through it. Inside dark homes, people talked quietly about memories, about summers, about warmth. Time slowed. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound outside made hearts race. Then, just before dawn, something changed. The wind softened. Snow began to fall straight down instead of sideways. The storm, exhausted at last, started to loosen its grip. Morning arrived slowly, cautiously. The sky lightened from gray to pale blue, revealing a country reshaped. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, sparkling under weak winter sun. People stepped outside for the first time in days. Some cried, some laughed. Some stood in silence, overwhelmed by the scale of what remained. Snowplows returned in force. Power crews worked around the clock. Airports slowly reopened. Roads reappeared beneath layers of ice and effort. Life did not snap back. It crawled. Communities took stock of what was lost and what endured. Homes damaged, vehicles buried, lives changed forever. Yet alongside the destruction, stories of kindness spread just as fast. Neighbors who had never spoken shared meals. Strangers saved strangers. In the coldest days, humanity had burned brightest. The storm of 2026 would be remembered not just for its snowfall totals or wind speeds, but for the moment it forced a nation to stop and then to help itself start again. America thawed, but no one forgot how quickly it froze.